What to do when a missile is flying towards your city, how people survive under shelling, the war of Russia against Ukraine, the conflict in Gaza, and the general increase in tension in the Middle East, sad prophecies about the future of relations between the US and China, you can tell the world is tense. Obviously, those who talk about the approach of World War III have many reasons for this. The history of the First and Second World Wars, which also began with local conflicts, scares contemporaries with obvious rhymes with the present. If it seems to you that all this is a matter of big politics that does not concern your personal life, it means you allow yourself an incredible luxury these days to be an optimist in pink-colored glasses. Well, we hope that real hostilities will never break into your life, but as the ancient Romans said, if you want peace, prepare for war. Everything we know about war, fortunately, we still only know from movies, and therefore, we imagine a person in war approximately like this.
On the phone! Brad, I'm Aldrin! I can't get a shot!
Or even like this. And in this way, you may think that if suddenly you find yourself in a combat zone, you have only two options for action. If you are military, heroically blast the enemy around the clock with all the weapons that come to hand. And if you are a civilian, run away from explosions and shots around the clock. But Hollywood screenwriters are not the best advisors on how to survive during combat operations. And the real life of a person in war can look like this. And for civilians sometimes like this. This is a real video from the war in Ukraine, and in the frame is an ordinary man from the city of Berdyansk. In his hands is an anti-tank mine that the Russians left on the road and which prevented cars from moving. So, the man decided to remove the obstacle. It should be noted, doing as this Ukrainian in the video is strictly prohibited because it is very, very dangerous. But these shots clearly demonstrate that despite the war, the lives of ordinary people continue, albeit in conditions of increased danger. But various mines are not the main threat to the civilian population, because the main enemy of civilians in war is everything that comes from the sky. In this video, we will examine in detail what modern wars use to shell cities, how air defense works, and how ordinary people can save their lives by knowing the features of different weapons. The experience of Ukrainians who, after more than 2 years of full-scale war, have found many life hacks and know everything about life under shelling, will help us with this. The first thing to understand is that at different distances from the line of combat contact with the enemy, civilians are threatened by different weapons, and the closer the city is to the front lines, the more ways the enemy has to harm ordinary people. But this does not mean at all that far in the rear, in the most remote from Russia towns of Ukraine, people are safe. On March 11, 2022, Russian troops hit the airport in the Ukrainian city of Ivano-Frankivsk, and it is located in western Ukraine at a distance of almost 620 miles from Russian troops on the eastern front lines of the country and almost 210 miles from the border with Belarus, which allows Russian troops to fire at Ukraine from its territory. Or here's another example. On August 15, 2023, in the city of Lviv, which is located at a distance of 140 miles from Belarus, 470 miles from Russia, and more than 500 miles from the Russian-occupied Crimean Peninsula, where Russian ships were based, at 4 a.m. an air raid alert sounded. Soon, several explosions were heard in the city. As a result of the attack, 100 houses were damaged, 6 of which were destroyed to such an extent that they could not be restored. 19 people were injured that day, including a 10-year-old child. So, distance from the enemy does not guarantee civilians a safe, quiet life at all. Even if we imagine some theoretical country that is shelled by the enemy from only one side of the border, its territory can be conditionally divided into 4 zones, depending on the type and intensity of the threat to civilians. The safest of them will be the far rear, which will still be reached by some types of missiles and kamikaze strike drones. somewhere in the middle of the country, will be a zone of more intense shelling. Here, in addition to long-range missiles and kamikaze drones, medium-range missiles will also reach. Well, closer to the combat zone, the situation will be much, much more dangerous. Because in addition to all these missiles and UAVs, there is the threat of shelling with KABs. That is, guided aerial bombs, which can reach a distance of up to 74 miles. And also, shelling from MLRS, multiple launch rocket systems, the range of shots of which in some cases can reach 124 miles. Well, the fourth zone for a civilian will be practically equal to being on the front line. Territories that are in close proximity to the line of combat contact can be shelled by both missiles and aerial bombs, and even by mortars. And now let's recall that all this is just our imaginary model of a situation in which the enemy is only on one side. If you look at the map of Ukraine, it becomes clear that the threat of shelling exists from the east, and from the north, and from the south. This means that most of the territory of this state is, if not in the third zone of destruction, then definitely in the second. It is clear that in this case, the vast majority of civilians throughout the country are constantly in the zone of enemy missile strikes. But the war has been going on for more than 2 years, and it is clear that sitting in bomb shelters all this time is simply unrealistic. That is why there are specially developed systems for alerting citizens about air raids. They are similar to US citizen emergency notifications, but given the number of potential threats and the volatility of the situation, they are much more complex. So, how it works? If you think that everything should be maximally automated and there is only one single button that a responsible person presses, then you are very mistaken. To warn citizens in time about the possibility of shelling, specialists have to collect information bit by bit, literally from everywhere. Of course, specialists of the air forces of the armed forces of Ukraine themselves continuously analyze the situation in the air over the territory of the country and a little beyond its borders, on the territory of the enemy, using special radars 24/7. But this is not enough, because planes with missiles can take off far beyond the reach of this equipment. In addition, some types of missiles fly out of Russian warships based in the Black Sea, and they are difficult to track. Therefore, intelligence comes to the rescue, both Ukrainian and intelligence of friendly countries, which periodically share important information with the Ukrainian military. Satellites also monitor potential carriers of missiles and bombs. Sometimes even partisans who are on the territory occupied by Russia help and timely inform the Ukrainian military about the activation of Russian equipment that may pose a threat from the air. All this information comes to the specialists of the Air Defense Forces, where they have to analyze the given facts very, very quickly and make a decision about notification. During this very short time, which sometimes can be counted in seconds, military specialists have to calculate the potential trajectories of missiles and drones launched by the enemy. This is necessary in order to understand which regions of the country this may threaten. As soon as the decision is made, the Air Forces transmit a message to the branch number 1 of the State Emergency Service in Kiev. And there, the duty officer presses the button that triggers in the relevant regions such an unpleasant to the ears, but very important for saving lives, air raid siren. This is the classic way of notifying citizens about danger from the air. By the way, in villages remote from urban infrastructure, the role of notifier about air raids is played by bell towers in churches. Having received information about the onset of danger from official sources, clergymen ring the bells and thus notify the local population about the threat. But as the war in Ukraine has shown, the classic notification system, that is, centralized activation of the signal from speakers on the streets, has its drawbacks. For example, sirens do not help people with hearing impairments learn about danger. In addition, sirens may not work in the case of their de-energization as a result of Russian military attacks on energy facilities in Ukraine. Moreover, after the first months of the war, it turned out that such a notification is uninformative and subsequently leads to people simply stopping responding to it. Why does this happen? The fact is that notification during war is fundamentally different from notifications about typhoons and hurricanes familiar to residents of the US or European countries. Any natural disaster that Americans and Europeans are notified about is obvious and inevitable, but most importantly, it has, although approximate but quite specific timeframes. You know for sure that soon it will end and your life will return to normal until the next occurrence of a threat, which may not happen so soon. But war and missile attacks are an event indefinitely stretched in time. An air raid alert can last 5 minutes, or it may not end for hours. It may notify that a deadly missile has already been launched by the enemy and is flying directly to a specific city, or it may only indicate that somewhere in Russia, a plane took off into the sky, which theoretically can fire a missile in an unknown direction, or it may not fire. And all this happens daily, for a long time, and without any specific prospects for the future. For example, on August 24, 2022, only in one day, 189 notifications about air raids were recorded, and of course, not all of them ended with shelling. And the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv in May 2024 set a sad record. Air danger here lasted continuously for 20 hours. It started at 9 a.m. on May 25th and ended only in the early morning of the next day. Of course, under such circumstances, people would have to either constantly sit in shelters or turn their lives into constant running to the bomb shelter and back. And this, as you understand, would make the functioning of society simply impossible. That is why Ukrainians quickly developed a need for more informative and diverse notification about air danger, which in the conditions of a long war turned out to be much more useful than the classic siren on city streets. First, this is an online map of air raids which is automatically updated every 15 seconds. It graphically depicts not only the territory where danger is announced, but also the source of this danger: air attack, artillery shelling, street fighting. Another of the most popular ways for Ukrainians to learn about the threat from the air is specially developed mobile applications. Using them, each person can choose the region in which they are located and set the type of sound signal and visual display that they want to receive in case of danger. Well, one of the most popular sources of information for Ukrainians are messages in the Telegram Messenger, where the air forces of the armed forces of Ukraine have created a special channel. There, in real time, official information appears about what exactly threatens this or that region and where enemy air targets are moving. Moreover, in this Telegram channel, Ukrainians are also notified about the source of explosions that they may hear in their city. So, civilians can immediately find out whether that loud explosion they heard was the result of an enemy missile hitting the city, or it was just the sound of the air defense working. And here, when Ukrainians receive information that the air raid alert is related to the fact that somewhere far away in Russia, from the Savaleyka airfield, which is more than 400 miles from Ukraine, a MiG-31 aircraft took off. Ukrainians most often do not change their plans in any way. After all, they know that the takeoff of this fighter does not mean a mandatory missile launch. Sometimes the plane just takes off to move to another base, or performs a training flight. But the message that the missile launch did take place forces people to change plans and think about shelter.
Одного разу була в нас повітряна тривога. Я кажу, давайте в підвал йдемо. І Олеся, моя старша, каже, а звідки летить? І Люба така, з Астрахані. І Олеся каже, а які ракети? І Люба така, Х-101 і Х-55. І Олеся така, ага, то навіть не гіперзвукові.
This is a fragment of a performance by Ukrainian stand-up comedian Taras Stadnitsky, and despite the fact that it's about humor, it is based on reality. Most Ukrainians, even children, really understand the varieties of missiles, because this allows them to understand how to act in this or that situation, quickly run to the bomb shelter, or plan their route in such a way as to be in it in a couple of hours. Yes, mostly it's about missiles, because in modern warfare, this is one of the most popular ways to hit large objects at great distances. There are a large number of them in the armament of different armies, including Russian. According to military experts' calculations, over 2 years of full-scale war against Ukraine, Russia used more than 7,000 missiles. Attacks by kamikaze drones are not far behind in number. According to calculations by Ukrainian military, since the beginning of the full-scale war, Russians have launched almost 4,000 strike UAVs into Ukrainian skies. And this is not counting the local use of combat drones directly in the combat zone. We are talking only about drones launched into peaceful cities of Ukraine. And although kamikaze drones pose a significant threat, Their strike capabilities are significantly inferior to the scale of destruction that missile attacks can cause. Missiles come in different classifications depending on what exactly they are launched from, on what principle their route is laid, how far they fly, and how much explosive they can carry. In Russia's war against Ukraine, the most dangerous are the strategic missiles Kh-47 meant to Kinzhal. Actually, these are the same missiles that can carry a nuclear charge, but can also be used with conventional explosives. And these missiles are quite mysterious, as they entered service in the Russian army relatively recently, since 2017. There was virtually no accurate information about their technical characteristics before Russia's full-scale attack on Ukraine. Russian military departments kept everything secret, and Russian media published either vague advertising descriptions of the new weapon or outright propaganda lies about its effectiveness. But when in 2022, the Russian army began to use Kinzhal missiles, shelling both military and civilian objects in various cities of Ukraine, analysis of the fragments allowed to learn a little more. So, Kinzhal is an aeroballistic missile. That is, a missile that is launched from an aircraft and flies along a ballistic trajectory. This means that there is simply no possibility to guide it to the desired target. The length of the missile is 25 feet 3 inches. The warhead weighs over 1,000 pounds. The maximum flight range of such a missile is 1864 miles. And this machine moves at a speed of 7,673 miles per hour. And this means that from the moment of launch from deep inside Russia until it enters Ukrainian airspace, only 3 to 4 minutes may pass. So civilians have only a few minutes to run to shelter. That is why, when somewhere far away in Russia a MiG-31 takes off, which is the carrier of these Kinzhal missiles, an air raid alert is announced throughout Ukraine. The risk is too high that civilians simply will not have time to hide in case of a missile launch, and the consequences of its hit are too catastrophic. Here's what just 3 such missiles can do. This is a former shopping center in the city of Odessa, which was hit by Russian Kinzhal missiles on May 9, 2022. Fortunately, no human casualties were recorded then, but 2 people were injured. 5 buildings of the city's tourist infrastructure were completely destroyed. For some time, it was believed that Kinzhal missiles were almost impossible to shoot down using air defense systems. Russian propaganda even convinced that this was unrealistic in principle. But on May 4, 2023, over the Kiev region, a Kinzhal missile was successfully intercepted for the first time using an American Patriot anti-aircraft missile system. Defense Express published and identified fragments of this missile, and the fact of the shoot-down was confirmed by US government sources and a Pentagon spokesman. In general, shooting down ballistic missiles is an extremely difficult task, and therefore, for the civilian population, such missiles pose a special threat. Sometimes, the missile manages to cross the border earlier than an air raid alert is announced. And Kinzhal is not the only option for such missiles in Russia's arsenal. Another type of ballistic missiles is the 9M723, which are launched from a ground-based missile system called Iskander. They can reach targets at a distance of 1,553 miles and move at a speed of 5,480 miles per hour. Another type of missile that threatens people in war is cruise missiles. Compared to ballistic missiles, their launch can be predicted a little earlier, but once in flight, they become a real problem for air defense forces. In essence, a cruise missile is the same unmanned vehicle that has its own engine and wings. What distinguishes it from a ballistic missile is that its flight trajectory can be very unpredictable and highly curved. It flies, bypassing the terrain. If there is an obstacle, the missile can rise and then descend into a lowland. At the same time, some cruise missiles have a relatively low speed, which allows them to be quickly detected and neutralized. It should also be noted that compared to ballistic missiles, cruise missiles are very expensive. For example, the Russian cruise missile Kh-101 costs approximately $13 million, and the price of another cruise missile, Caliber, varies from $5 to $6.5 million. But the strike capabilities of such missiles obviously scare the civilian population of Ukraine more than their price scares the Russian authorities. Here are the results of a Caliber-type cruise missile hitting the building of the Mykolaiv Regional State Administration on March 29, 2022. Then the missile hit the 4th floor of the building, resulting in a huge hole, from the 1st to the 9th floors. As a result of this attack, 37 people died. And here you can see the consequences of another cruise missile, KH-22, hitting a residential building in the city of Dnipro on January 14, 2023. With one strike, an entire block of an apartment building was completely destroyed. 46 people died, including 3 children. 75 residents were injured. As high-ranking military officials noted, at the moment this missile hit the residential building, Ukraine simply did not have the means to shoot down such missiles. And before this tragic event, Russian military fired 210 Kh-22 cruise missiles at various objects in the country, none of which air defense managed to shoot down. The fact is that the Kh-22 is the largest of all missiles in Russia's arsenal. Its length is 38 feet 4 inches. Imagine a truck raised in the air, and you will roughly understand how dangerous this missile can be even if it did not contain explosives. But the Kh-22 also carries the largest possible warhead for a missile, over 2,000 pounds. All this flies at a speed of 2,485 miles an hour, changing trajectory and maneuvering through air corridors. But even for this cruise missile, Ukrainian air defense forces eventually found a way to deal with it. On April 19, 2024, military personnel reported that finally, for the first time in the full-scale war, they shot down 2 Kh-22 cruise missiles. The description of all these weapons and the consequences of their hits on various objects may lead you to think that all this is so terrible that it is simply unrealistic to live under such a threat. Even when air defense forces demonstrate incredible productivity and shoot down missiles that were previously officially considered invincible. But most Ukrainians continue to live in their country despite all these threats. People adapt to war conditions, gain new skills and knowledge that help survive in such circumstances, and then even improve in the ability to distinguish levels of danger and find non-trivial ways of protection. For example, they arrange a bedroom in a closet, away from windows, or a tent city in an underground parking lot or in the subway. They learn to distinguish the sound of explosions from the sounds of air defense work, and they study the approach speed of different types of missiles in order to plan their normal life activities during an air raid alert. The main thing to understand about people who are in war is that they continue to live, work, raise children, study, meet friends, go to the theater. And all this knowledge helps them do all this believing in air defense. If you are interested in how exactly air defense works, how kamikaze drones are neutralized in the air, and how rescue services work during shelling, write about it in the comments, and we will tell you about it in the next video.